Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla Apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition and liftoff. Go Thoraya.
Have you ever pondered the question, what would be the dominant species without humans? Picture a world void of human influence, where the concrete jungles of cities have been reclaimed by nature, and the hum of technology has been replaced by the chorus of wildlife. This isn't a dystopian tale, but rather an intriguing thought experiment into the nature of dominance and adaptability in the animal kingdom.
According to the United States' Federal Communication Commission, there could be as many as 100,000 satellites orbiting the Earth in just the next couple of decades. This will, for the first time in history, open up the internet to the entire human species, regardless of geographic location. This revolution will no doubt bring across unprecedented technological change and unleash global communications on a level never before seen.
We have never had a human-made object so close to the sun. Also, we had to not melt. That's why the Parker has this heat shield that holds the instruments at room temperature and keeps the heat of the sun away. And these are just amazing feats. And so it's so amazing that we are so close and really getting to measure in detail this material up close.
Has it been 2 weeks already? Apparently it has, because as you might already divine by the fascinating subjects that we just previewed for you, from record numbers of stars to record numbers of Space Force missions, there is a ton going on with respect to space, the stars, the sun, and you name it if it involves looking up. And our go-to person on that journey of exploration is Dr. Sky, Steve Kates. He's going to join us for some cosmic conversations.
The Other Side of Midnight presents from the spiral to the elliptical to the lenticular to the irregular to the quasars, galaxies. Where are we in the cosmic evolutionary picture? Always remember to keep your eyes to the skies. The following conversations are cosmic conversations with Steve Kates, a.k.a. Dr. Sky.
Who is Dr. Sky? He is a treat. If you're interested in these subjects, he is somebody that you enjoy listening to because he knows a thing or two about a thing or two. If you have not given much thought to what's going on with other planets and rocket launches on this planet, he's someone you enjoy listening to because he has the best voice in all of radio. He's a veteran radio and TV broadcaster and an edutainer who knows a whole lot about space and astronomy. He's also a terrific podcaster with the Red Apple Podcast Network, where you can check out his podcast, The Dr. Sky Experience. Steve, it's great to talk to you again.
Well, good morning, Frank, and Happy New Year to you and the listeners as well. We move into the 8th day of the brand new year. It surely seems like a promising one, at least on the subjects that we talk about, from astronomy, space, aviation, weather, and all the other great things that open up people's minds.
Steve, it was not long ago where you were routinely reporting triple-digit temperatures from where you're based in Arizona. I'm seeing all over radio, all over television, all over the newspapers, record cold for this time of year, enveloping a whole bunch of the country. Something tells me you're not exactly spending a lot of time shoveling snow this week.
Well, no, we're not. But let me say this. The temperature here may seem a little odd to many people. And again, great sympathy for those that are suffering the woes of winter. When we find out, Frank, astronomically, that the Earth is closest to the sun just 4 days ago at 91.4 million miles, and people will say, no, I can't believe anything like that, Dr. Sky says. But here, no, temperatures in the daytime, we reached about 82 a few days ago, and in the evenings now it's dropping into the 40s. But seriously, Frank, this whole polar vortex, I mean, something amazing that's just happening to good portions of North America right now. Many people describe this as even more intense than years past. But again, this is what we can expect when a change in the jet stream is really occurring. So us in the Southwest, pretty much weather systems are moving way above us, then arcing back down into the midsection of the country, and of course, putting the deep freeze into the Midwest and the mid-Atlantic states, and obviously in your region, where I think in the New York area, temperatures I think now are somewhere around the mid-20s.
Whatever it is cold. By the way, if people want to call in with questions about any of the subjects we're talking about or anything that involves space in general, we're going to give them that opportunity. Our phone number is 646-720-0635. That's 1-646-720-0635. Speaking of Arizona, Steve, they made some news regarding a former planet that we have spoken about quite a bit, and that is, I still consider it a planet, but the rest of the astronomical world considers it a dwarf planetoid, and that's Pluto, not the Disney character that's entering the public domain next year, but the dwarf planetoid. What is Arizona doing with respect to Pluto?
Well, Frank, I was a little remiss in reporting on this Cosmic Conversation episode, or the episodes in the past. I find out here through friends of mine, I should have been up on this, that our governor here, Arizona Governor Katie Hobbs, signed House Bill 2477 and officially created Pluto as the official planet of Arizona. Now, that's interesting because many in the astronomy world will say, well, wait a minute, Governor. It's not a planet. We now call it a dwarf, but I would agree with the governor and the rest of the people that thought that it never should have changed. So that's quite interesting. And no other state in the nation has, at least at this time, an official, quote, planet. And again, it goes back to my days in school back at New Mexico State University when he, the discoverer, Dr. Clyde Tombaugh, we got to know each other very well, and I have lots of archival information on that discovery. But just what an interesting man, what an interesting tribute when he discovered Pluto here back on February 18th, 1930, about 120 miles north of me up in Flagstaff, Arizona.
Well, but here's a serious question. When Arizona schools are teaching elementary school students about the planets, are they going to teach that Pluto is one of the planets, or are they going to follow the curriculum that a lot of the other schools around the country do, which is that it's not one of the planets in the solar system?
That's a good question, Frank. It's more of a conundrum. I would imagine if you take a look at a lot of these puzzles for children and other star maps and planetary maps, they've obliterated Pluto completely, and that's a shame. But I'm not sure exactly how they're going to do that. But if they followed the so-called, designation that the governor has, we're calling it a planet, but serious science, and I would disagree with this serious science. I mean, we had a campaign many, many years ago talking about how to remove the dwarf designation. But I don't know. That's an interesting subject, and I'll have to get back with you as we talk more in the different school programs that we do, just what their curriculum will be. So I'll be voting for planet.
Yeah, same here. All right, Monday is a big day in terms of the moon and Mars. What's going on Monday? It's a major sky event, from what I'm told.
Well, Frank, here's a great one. It could be considered for 2025, maybe like a Super Bowl event for sky watchers. Here it is. On the evening of Monday, the 13th of January, wherever you're listening to this radio show, wide and across the nation, particularly, I'll give a couple of times here. What's going to happen is that the full wolf moon, the first full moon of 2025, is going to get in the way and eclipse the planet Mars. Now, that may seem like, well, what's so special about it? Mars, Frank, will be coming closest to the Earth by the 12th. So when we look into the skies, and I'm just giving the example of, let's say, the New York City listening area, I would start looking at the moon, which will be pretty high in your sky. Hopefully you have clear weather. Just a little bit around 9 p.m. on Monday evening, you'll see that beautiful full moon. just to the left of it, maybe in the proximate position of the 8 o'clock position, like you looked at the moon as the face of a clock, you will see about 9:21 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the moon will eclipse the planet Mars, and it'll reappear on the opposite side a little over an hour ago. And there's many different times across the nation people can check. But this is a pretty significant event because they call it an occultation. And remember, in our Christmas edition and other editions of Cosmic Conversations, we talked about possible explanations of the beautiful Christmas star, the star, of course, that led the wise men to the birth of the Christ child. And one of the more logical ones we talked about was that the moon eclipsed Jupiter. And Jupiter had great significance in the ancient world as this magical king. We know Zeus, the god of gods, Greek and Roman mythology. So it's something not to miss, and it'll be seen widely across North America and in other parts of Africa. So if you're really looking for something unusual, take a look at this. Now, telescopes are going to be better if you want to watch the planet Mars literally dance through the lunar mountains, which is beautiful, and then go away. But binoculars would probably be the easiest way to enjoy this. It's something not to miss. So I'm glad we were able to report it here far and wide on Cosmic Conversation.
Absolutely. So Monday night around 9 p.m. Eastern, that's when people should pull out their binoculars and start paying attention.
Absolutely. Great event.
All right. 646-720-0635. You know, recently my son got a pair of, they call them kid-noculars, but they're binoculars, and he enjoys playing around with them. I'm going to see, maybe we'll keep him up a little past his bedtime on Monday and see if we can get a look at Moon and Mars Mania. That'll be fun.
That'll be great.
All right. Ted is in Forest Hills. Hi there, Ted.
Thank you. May I say blessed New Year and Happy New Year. I wanted to ask Dr. Scott if he could mention how much the sun burns every second and what size binoculars was he recommend for stargazing. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Ted, good morning. Happy New Year to you. Let's go with the second part of your question. The pair of binoculars I would recommend for general sky watching a pair of, say, 7 by 50, meaning 7 is the power. 10 by 50 is also good. The number on the right is the millimeter size, so the bigger the number on the X number to the right is obviously a larger piece of glass. But it's so interesting. Now, the sun, if we're talking about this, and this is not an absolute specific answer because it changes. So we're looking at probably in the area of maybe 400 or 500 million tons of hydrogen every second. The number probably goes higher at different times of the solar cycle. And it's transmuted or transformed into a lesser amount by maybe a couple of maybe 80 to 100 million tons. It loses this material and transformation in the nuclear process into helium. So it's a simple thing, at least from the explanation side, but it's very complex from the physics side. So the sun is actually consuming hydrogen. Obviously, there's nothing free in the universe, Ted. We obviously, we look at the stars and we say even they lose energy over time and deplete or explode into supernovas. So the sun is literally converting hundreds of millions of tons of hydrogen into helium every second. But the good news, Ted, and for everybody out there, we don't think the sun is going to stop doing its great thing, meaning creating energy, fusion-wise, for about another 4 billion years. So we can rest on our laurels on that, at least we think.
Good question, Ted. Thank you. 646-720-0635. Steve, there are some major rocket launches happening this month. What are the major launches? What should we be on the lookout for?
Well, here's a quick summary of what's happening. We could look at seeing Starship 7, the next iteration of the big Starship spacecraft with the giant booster, the over 400-foot tall massive rocket, go up as early as 5 p.m. on January the 10th. And if all goes as planned, this particular launch has two functions. They're actually going to try to deploy 10 simulated Starlink satellites into orbit, because remember, the actual spacecraft, the Starship, sits on top of the booster. And they're also going to try this time. Maybe they'll do this, maybe they won't. They've already done it. People have seen it. And if you missed it, folks, the lower part of the spacecraft is the massive booster. And what did it do, Frank? We all watched this. It came back successfully, soft landed, back at the grappling arms of the launch tower. So they may try to recreate that, but this is quite fascinating. But on the other side of the coin, if we talk about space competitors in the privatized world, Jeff Bezos is actually getting set to launch his 320-foot tall New Glenn heavy launch rocket vehicle. And that could take place maybe as early as the 10th of January, just coming up, 1 a.m. Eastern Time, from a very interesting launch pad at the Cape Canaveral/Cape Kennedy launch facility. One that gets used, but we don't hear so much about. The Apollos had different launch pads, 39A and B. This one is launch pad 36, and the significance of it is, if people were able to do this, and I don't know if they closed the roads, it's the closest launch pad that people could ever watch the launch if they were on the beach. Now remember, they don't let you get closer than probably 3 or 4 miles to any launch. But this is hopefully successful for Bezos because he's also going to have a payload on there called Blue Ring. And what's that? It's a test platform that eventually they could put into space on future rocket launches. He's trying to mimic the Falcon Heavies that Musk has been doing. But this will be a future platform to put in different devices or other cargo that could be used just like we see on aircraft that fly big containers like the FedEx aircraft. You could actually put in this like tray, if you want to call it, in space. So we wish them both well. I mean, this is amazing just how far we've come in space. Because if we went back, 20 years ago, when you and I were having a conversation over a coffee or a beer, wouldn't it be amazing to both of us, I'm sure, if we said, hey, you think privatized space efforts will outpace NASA? We'd probably what are you talking about? But they are doing that.
That is quite amazing, and I am looking forward to that next conversation that takes place over a beer because there's no shortage of interesting subjects that even we run out of time to get to on the radio. All right, we're going to continue in a moment. If you have questions, feel free to dial in at 646-720-0635. That's 646-720-0635. This is The Other Side of Midnight. Straight ahead.
The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
ChatGPT Plus is free for college students through May. Here's the thing. You've got a lot to do between now and then. Studying for finals, writing papers, trying to keep your life on track. And ChatGPT can help with all of it. It can quiz you for your econ exam, make a study guide from your French notes, plan out your meals and study breaks. It can get really specific on how you like to learn. It can even help you come up with ways to stop procrastinating. So from now until summer break, take advantage of all the ways ChatGPT can make your life easier. Restrictions apply.
Your snacking routine can get a little dull. Time for a light and fit remix. Like a crunchy storm of graham cookies, caramel pearls, and dark chocolate, showering down into a smooth, creamy yogurt. Enjoy 3 light and fit remix varieties with craveable flavors and up to 120 calories and 10 grams of protein per 4.5-ounce serving. See RemixYogurt.com.
This podcast is supported by Progressive, a leader in RV insurance. RVs are for sharing adventures with family, friends, and even your pets. So if you bring your cats and dogs along for the ride, you'll want Progressive RV Insurance. They protect your cats and dogs like family by offering up to $1,000 in optional coverage for vet bills in case of an RV accident, making it a great companion for the responsible pet owner who loves to travel. See Progressive's other benefits and more when you quote RV Insurance at Progressive.com today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Pet injury is an additional coverage and subject to policy terms.
It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
Blue moon, you saw me standing alone, without a dream in my heart, without love of my own. Blue moon.
The great Elvis Presley on what would have been his 90th birthday singing Blue Moon. I don't know about you, but I think Elvis is still alive, and certainly his music is. Talking about all things space and star-related with the one and only Dr. Sky, Steve Cates. If what we're talking about piques your interest at all, you really need to check out the Dr. Sky Experience. You could just go to any podcast app and search the Dr. Sky Experience, or go to redapplepodcastnetwork.com and search Dr. Sky. It comes right up. Steve, I realize this is the first conversation that we've had since Jimmy Carter passed away. I spent a little bit of time talking about Jimmy Carter's UFO sighting before he became president. And then I know a lot of the other people in the press have talked about Jimmy Carter being somebody that was very environmentally conscious and did things like put solar panels on the White House. What was Jimmy Carter's record like when it came to space exploration and the space program, Steve?
Well, he was very positive to, move NASA forward. But I think he had his hands tied, this is my opinion, but doing some research on this, that we probably, according to many in the NASA, the historical side, we probably could have moved on to Mars already. But what happened was we found out that future Apollo missions were slated for deletion by President Nixon. And the future of the space program was then kind of put into kind of like a little malaise for a while. And what Jimmy Carter, I think, really was forced to do, not something he probably could have changed. He was a big proponent, obviously, of space travel. But the space shuttle program was really what was coming online then. And many people may not realize this. Since the first launch of the shuttle back in the early 80s, this was already, fabricated and put into the budget of the federal government. But Jimmy Carter, obviously being an engineer, Naval Academy graduate, a very serious person for the side of details, he would, I'm sure if he were still alive today, God bless him, 100 years of age, simply he was a proponent of space. And it's fascinating that you were talking about his UFO sighting. One of the first presidents to really let the can, let the thing out of the bag or so. It was interesting. So we respect him, and he'll be remembered for a long time to come.
Absolutely. All right, 646-720-0635. Stephen is in Manhattan. Hi, Stephen.
Good morning, Stephen.
Yes, and hello, gentlemen, and thank you for taking my call. Just a couple of things.
Sure.
I have read recently that all the galaxies in our quote-unquote universe are flying away from each other, speeding away from each other, that in time, however long that may be, nothing will be visible in the sky.
Yes.
A, and what do you say about that? And B, I have been following the quote-unquote extraterrestrial UFO story since I was in a young boy, and I'm in my 80s now, and I'm quite fed up with the holding back of information. So what is your opinion about We Are Not Alone? And are there frozen extraterrestrials at Area 51? And what do you say about that whole story?
All right. That's quite a bit there,
When you
Steve.
bring up some very interesting and philosophical, questions, comments, and such. But let me start with the second part. This whole concept, as one who studies the sky, and many others, of course, who do this all day, 24, 26 hours a day, I firmly believe, in my opinion, that the universe simply is populated with some sort of intelligent life. I don't know necessarily about the whole time factor, about how these, whatever these inhabitants are, how they move through time and space, but they've probably mastered something that we don't know how to do, and that's the warpage of space-time. I've been literally, I don't like the word, Frank, and Stephen, thrown out of Area 51. And a long time ago, we were trying to go behind the big signs that said do not enter because of all the allegations of things hovering up over that area across the thing called the Freedom Ridge. But I would say this way very simply, and I know Frank obviously leads the charge on this every morning on, the other side of midnight. I don't understand why, Stephen. We've never been able to get the answer to this. I mean, just tell us, do I believe there's bodies stored somewhere? According to more reliable whistleblowers, they say yes. But let's go back to the first part of what you were asking about the expansion of the universe. You're absolutely right. Since we don't know what direction or where that single point location was 13.7 billion years ago when the whole shebang literally expanded, you're right. At one time in the very distant future, everything, light in itself, everything will move out into the great void, And you're right, there will be nothing but eternal darkness. It sounds very depressing, right, as we talk, Frank, in a new year. But the extent, Stephen, finally going on, I wish we had more time to talk about it, is the extent of the universe, they believe, is about maybe 93 billion light years out to the edge of the universe for now. And guess what, guys and ladies and gentlemen out there? It's still going to continue. And something in gravity, which we don't understand, is dark energy. And the object would be there. The problem there is things that go out and expand from an expansion, you would expect them to slow down. There's a thing in gravity that we don't understand that's making those things move faster. So isn't that interesting, Stephen and Frank and everybody listening? We don't really have the answers to that, but there will be darkness one day. Not to be depressing, but that's the factoid.
That is, well, hopefully, not hopefully, but the fact is none of us will be around to see it, right? I mean, so.
This is a long time away.
Exactly.
Right.
Hey, speaking of.
But it could be wrong. We could be wrong, though, too. I mean, let me say this. Since we're going to talk, I'm sure, later about when people are observing the farthest, most distant galaxies ever, we simply, Frank, I know we have a lot to talk about, we may simply have to rewrite the whole concept of cosmology because we may be wrong on more than 50% of these ideas.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned that. Talking about the end, whether we're talking about the end of the galaxy, the end of the universe, or the end of humanity's time on this planet. I read somewhere years ago that if the history of this planet were a large encyclopedia, that humanity's time on this planet would occupy about the last half of the last page of that encyclopedia. That's how much living has gone on this planet before we were here. What happens after human extinction? Whether it's an asteroid, whether it's something else, whether it's AI, chat bots taking over all the nuclear weapons and destroying us all. After the humans are gone, what species would become dominant?
I'll answer that, but may I just digress one moment what Stephen was talking about? And one other option to give positivity to the conversation is that the universe may go in reverse, and there's something called a big crunch. So everything would then collapse unto itself, but we don't know. But the interesting thing that we're talking about here is this. Biologists, astrophysicists, astrobiologists around the world have this big conference. And they sit there and say, nuclear war, asteroid impact, viruses, we can't get along, millions of years, let's say, human extinction. Many of them in the room were saying that biologic creatures, and one particular one, the octopus, and I think you have to say it right, correct? If you have more than one, they're octopi. So they're saying that the octopus would then populate the Earth. Now, that sounds ludicrous to some, doesn't it? How are they just going to populate the Earth? But over the course of time, which you just brought up about the whole human existence, if you put it into like a CD-ROM, where you had an actual storage device on your computer, is a tiny little dot in the timeline of the universe. But it's interesting, and the reason they say this, and I'm no biology expert on this, but they're saying that the ability for these creatures to regenerate limbs, their tentacles, the ability for them to be able to think, and it's very interesting that we talk about this possibility, but this is, again, an opinion of many. There could be other things. And some have said, why not primates? Why not primates? And they're saying, well, the primates may fall under the same conundrums because their intellectual level may not be anywhere as close to what we believe octopus can do. They can change shape. They can move through the water in great speeds. But there's one of that species that I really don't want to ever meet. And if you're ever off the coast of California, there's this gigantic squid called a Humboldt squid. And if you take a look at the thing, Frank, it looks like a missile with wings. It has a gigantic eye, and it has a beak, and it doesn't necessarily attack people, but I don't think I would be swimming too close or trying to get anywhere near a Humboldt squid. But what you never say to any of those creatures, and not trying to be funny, is yell out the word, of course you'd have to be on land, calamari.
Yeah, I don't believe for a second you weren't trying to be funny. All right.
Not at all.
646-720-0635. Our friend Neil is on Staten Island. Hi, Neil.
Good morning, Neil.
Yeah, Doc, I was going to say that calamari thing. You beat me to the punch.
Got to have a little fun, right?
I was thinking it. I ordered calamari yesterday in anticipation of that discussion.
Wow.
Very nice. I got two questions for you.
Yes, sir.
The first one is, these astronauts have been stranded. Now they're saying something like March. For all we know, it could be October.
Who knows?
They're losing a good part of their lives up there for their families. Do you think they have any recourse against Boeing for suing them for maybe negligence or incompetence or something, for not being able to get them down or stranding them?
Neil, I don't really know the answer to that. I mean, if human emotion goes out of this, remember one thing. Both of those individuals are so well trained. I mean, I couldn't do what they're doing, and I'm humble about this. I don't know you personally. Frank would have to speak for himself. But the ability to become one of those, you have this, kind of understanding that things can go wrong because, remember, the days of Wally Schirra, when he used to sit with Walter Cronkite in the great days, and many listeners remember that, the early Apollo and Mercury and Gemini launches. He was asked many times, Walter Cronkite would look at Wally and say, gee, Wally, he goes, how safe is space travel? And then Wally's response, he was a little bit humorous, he would say, yeah, but the whole thing was built by the lowest bidder. So the reality of this is, I just wouldn't imagine that they're going to sue them for anything. I doubt if the astronauts would. I think that comes from other contractors that are dependent on the usage of the Starliner.
Thank you, Neil. Appreciate that. Steve, you have educated me over the course of the last couple of years that we've been chatting about solar storms and, CMEs and all this solar weather activity that I was pretty ignorant of before we started chatting, to be quite honest. What's going on in terms of solar activity these days? I know it's been a tumultuous time for solar weather of late.
Well, here's the news. As we move into 2025, Solar Cycle 25 is really not going to end anytime soon. It's kind of befuddling the scientists. They're saying, wow, this is a little more powerful than we thought. So their predictability and their forecasts were wrong. So what's happened in the last few days? Start with the beginning of 2025. We've had, as of January the 3rd, and this could go on, maybe I'm inaccurate when we finish this program, but we've had 3 X-flares since January the 3rd. And maybe more on the way. We had an X1, another X1, and we had an X2. Now, these are the higher levels of flares on the sun. So what's interesting about this is that most of the solar activity, if you looked at the globe of the sun, and you drew a line along the equator, most of the big flares and solar sunspot activity has been the southern hemisphere. Now, why is that important? It's because the northern hemisphere of the sun is lagging behind the southern. So what's happening here, the astrophysicists and scientists, space scientists predict that a lot of this activity is still yet to come from the northern hemisphere of the sun, again, confusing their forecasts. So then bottom line is everybody should obviously keep their eyes to the skies if they have the chance to look for the auroras, which are seen in lower latitudes right now. But the nefarious side of it is, of course, if we get hit by a CME blast, what are we? As we repeat all the time, we're so dependent on our digital technology and our satellites in space. So Solar Cycle 25, Frank, is not to be won and put into the history books.
Interesting. All right, 646-720-0635. Alexi is in Brooklyn. Hi, Alexi.
Yes,
hi, Alexi. Good morning.
Good morning. Yes. I want to ask you a question for Dr. Sky. What is any book or document that I could get that will tell me the history among various cultures of what they perceive were the constellations? I know that they differ from culture to culture. Where can I get some information?
Alexi, you got me stumped on that one, and I'm usually pretty well read by the books that I have in my own library, and instead of me going into the next room, I can just tell you this way. Every single culture, which you probably know, and the listeners may not, for instance, all the full moons that we name here, the full wolf moon coming up, a lot of Native American cultures, beautiful cultures, gave these names. But if you look into Chinese history, into the Arabic nations, if you look into the areas in the South Pacific, everybody has a complete different description for these things. But pretty much what, Alexia, along the same lines of the beautiful stories that, because we call it the wolf moon, other cultures may call it, who knows, the snow moon. They may be calling it anything else. But you got me on that one. I can't really think of any one book particularly. And probably the reason why, there are so many individual books, but not one that gives every different culture So maybe that's something we can do for some homework for Alexi, right, Frank?
I'm game. Thank you, Alexi.
Okay.
646-720-0635. My guest is Steve Kates, a.k.a. Dr. Sky. If you want to check out the Dr. Sky experience, you can do so just by going to redapplepodcastnetwork.com, or you can just subscribe to it on any podcast app. Just search the Dr. Sky experience, hit the subscribe button, and every time there's a new edition, it'll be downloaded to your mobile phone. We will continue in a moment with more Cosmic Conversations.
The Other Side of Midnight. It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
Genesis singing Tonight, Tonight. This is actually a birthday bumper music selection from Jack Maldonado, the former operations manager at WABC Radio, and he was the first person to hire me at WABC for a paying job. I had been working for free as an intern, and Jack Maldonado gave me the opportunity to get hired as a call screener. So I always will owe him one for that. He's done a lot of other things, worked everywhere, one of the most technically proficient broadcasting professionals I've ever encountered. Happy birthday, Jack Candy Maldonado. Meantime, we are having some cosmic conversations, and we'll continue having them with your help. You can jump on board and ask a question of Dr. Sky at 646-720-0635. That's 646-720-0635. Steve, you mentioned Monday's, a celestial event that we need to be aware of, Moon Mars Mania. For the rest of the month of January, what should we be on the lookout for?
Well, on the evening of the 9th, if your skies are clear, wherever the big sound of the station is across America and everywhere, we find ourselves looking at the moon. It's now waxing just before it goes full. It looks like egg-shaped. They call it gibbous in the astronomy world. If you look on the evening of the 9th, tomorrow night for many, you will, of course, get the chance to see the moon slide through a group of stars called the Pleiades, the Seven Sisters. And it's funny because when we're out here in Sedona doing programs with people in the mountains, people look up at that time of year, this time, and they look and they say, oh, there's the Little Dipper. Well, it looks about the size of the full moon, so the moon is going to occult. Again, the big word like we talked about with the moon covering Mars, they call it an occultation. If you get a pair of binoculars on the night of the 9th and start looking at the moon, you will see after sunset it's gliding through those stars, which is just a beautiful thing to see. But turning our heads, Frank, to the southwest when the sun is setting, Venus reaches its greatest elongation, as they call it, the eastern side, meaning that it's in the sky when the sun goes down. That takes place on the 10th. And for those that have telescopes, Venus, which is an amazing planet, it's the planet that gets closest to the Earth of all the major planets. It can come within 25 million miles. That sounds like far, but it is close planetary-wise. It will appear like a half-lit moon. And these planets, Mercury and Venus, go through phases. So you can actually see them at times looking like a little tiny crescent moon. But Venus, it's so bright. And Frank, with the discussion that's yet, unanswered, the mystery of the drones, there are always so many people, no fault of their own, we want to encourage them to learn the sky. The planet Venus, above any object in the heavens, has been categorized as a UFO by many that don't know these objects. So when you look there, you can tell your neighbors and friends, right, folks, that that's Venus, not a UFO.
Based on your research, though, all those drones that were being seen in places like New Jersey, they're not all cases of mistaken identity, are there? There really were.
Absolutely not. No, absolutely not. And I was listening intently to the station, this particular station, of course, and many of the people calling in and recorded on air to describe it. And when somebody tells me, or I hear it, that they see something hovering over their house, obviously there's something to that. But in many cases, if you look distant in the sky, and you're not, let's say, a regular observer of the sky, it is very easy to see any fixed-wing aircraft that you can't see because they're far enough away with shimmering lights. And right here, let's say in Phoenix, we have the big Sky Harbor Airport. If you go out into the desert, you'll see what looks like a trail of lights looking like they're on a, like pearl on a string. But those are aircraft separated about 3 miles apart. And one other explanation, which I heard a listener call in, and they recorded it to play on your station, was that many people were seeing a string of what looked like these lights in the sky. And guess what they really found out they were? They were the Starlink satellite trains that go across the sky. That's amazing. I've seen one, and they look incredible. You see all these dots moving across the sky in a perfectly straight line. Believe me, that looked very strange.
We're going into the next Trump administration now, Steve, and one of the, I consider, major accomplishments of the first Trump administration, which I very rarely hear anybody talk about, was the establishment of the Space Force. And there's so many potential uses for keeping America and maybe even the planet safe that I could see the Space Force coming in handy with. Apparently, another story that a lot of people didn't take note of last year is that the U.S. Space Force actually broke its launch record with 93 liftoffs. What sort of missions are these exactly, and what is the Space Force exactly doing at the moment? Because I feel like a lot of folks, even folks that follow the news pretty closely, they may not be hip to this.
Well, a lot of the very so-called secret spy satellites, and I don't like the word spy, I mean, they're surveillance more so. Well, what's the difference? Spy sounds like surveillance. Like the NRO, the National Reconnaissance Office, and other governmental agencies. They're launching these satellites in the dark of night, let's say, or sometimes during the day. At certain times they have to. But there's one other one that gets launched that many people don't need, we don't follow regularly, is the little X-37 space planes. And that is still a big mystery, a little object that looks like a space shuttle, tiny little thing, maybe only 20 feet long compared to a big space shuttle. But it's either testing out new type of propulsion systems, one called xenon propulsion, which is not necessarily chemical propulsion. It's more like, firing this energy out the back end, and you get propulsion. That and the rest of that for another time on another show. But we're also finding out that we have other objects that we're not told about that, who knows what they're putting up there. Allegedly, not to alarm people, the Russians at one time claimed they had an orbital bomb system in the low Earth orbit and a nuclear weapon in space, which is supposed to be prohibited. But Frank, if you look at the whole world, there were some 259 launches worldwide of rockets into the sky. And if you look at what SpaceX has done, they have, and I hope the number is fairly accurate, I think it is, 134 in 2024. 88 of those were launched from Florida and 46 of them from Vandenberg, the space base out on the West Coast. So Space Force, obviously, they're also using some of the technology that SpaceX has, but more so, I would believe, more of the so-called semi or somewhat secret space missions that are going into low Earth orbit to protect the nation, to protect it from anything that might come to harm the security of the United States.
All right. We're going to continue with your questions. 646-720-0635 if you want to jump on board. Let us say hello to Bill in Huntington. Hi, Bill.
Good morning.
Okay. Now, there's many cultures around the world, and the ones that are separated, they come up with different constellations, but most of them involve bright stars and patterns of bright stars, except for one, and that's the Inca. And their constellations were always dark clouds in the Milky Way.
Yes.
I don't get that.
Well, Bill, this is the best explanation I can give. You're right. Of many cultures in the world that were looking at stars, like if you look in the heavens right now, Sirius, the brightest of all the stars in the heavens, about the brightness of Mars right now, if you're looking out there into the heavens. But what's interesting about this is they had the ability, and we don't know how, they didn't have telescopes, but if you look deep into the Milky Way, one of their specialties was looking into the summer Milky Way. And if anybody has seen this, great. For those that haven't, here's an opportunity. If you're away from city lights, I'm talking about dark countryside, and you look around July and you look due south, you'll see the heart and soul, as we call it, of the Milky Way. And the Incas, Aztecs included, and many South American cultures look deeply into these dark nebular clouds, and they had so many explanations for them that actually one of them was like a birthing area where this celestial goddess was giving birth through, like, it looked like a celestial womb, if you want to call that. So they had this ability to see, and probably not many people can see this, of course, in city lights, but the Milky Way has not just these bright star clouds, but it also has dark star clouds. And they, above, many other civilizations, really looked at that, charted them, and actually had their own description of constellations and groups of objects in the heavens. Fascinating stuff, Bill, really.
Yeah, that is for sure. NASA announced that its Parker Solar Probe passed within a record-breaking 3.8 million miles of the sun a little while ago. That's pretty impressive. 3.8 million miles doesn't sound terribly close, but in solar terms, I guess it is, Steve.
It is, Frank, and that's really, you have to give the scientists of JPL, Johns Hopkins, all the people that worked on this. What you've got here is a sophisticated spacecraft that its electronics and imaging system and, sensors is protected by this incredible heat shield that's like, you would imagine that there's nothing on Earth that can withstand that. Think about the Starliner. Think about the other Apollo astronauts. They all came back safely to Earth, when they do on Starliner, with these heat shields that protects the heat. But when you get that close to the sun, remember, the photospheric surface temperature of the sun is about 12,000 degrees. So look at it this way, Frank. If you're 3.8 million miles from the sun, can you imagine the angular diameter of the sun compared to what we see it here? But the spacecraft, Frank, did something even more bizarre. It's moving into the outer atmosphere of the sun called the corona. And the great mystery there is, why is the corona much hotter than the surface of the sun? A technical answer given quickly, and I encourage listeners to look this up. It's something called Alfvén waves, A-L-F-E-N. They're Alfvén waves, named after a Danish scientist. There's some kind of ability for heat transfer that goes from lower to higher temperatures, but through magnetism. Now, that may sound, and hopefully people don't change the channel hearing that complicated thing. But Frank, the most amazing part of this, which will enlighten anybody, I'm just amazed at this. The fastest man-made object ever to pass through space was going over 430,000 miles an hour as it was slinging toward the sun and got shot out. Imagine going that fast. That's like going, they say, from New York to Tokyo in like 30 seconds. That's incredible. And maybe faster.
That absolutely is incredible. What's also incredible is that there was this groundbreaking study where astronomers detected a record number of stars in a distant galaxy. I'm always amazed whenever there's any discussion about us being able to see anything in other galaxies, let alone distant galaxies. Our galaxy, the Milky Way, is so enormous, so vast. To think that we could see details in other galaxies, it really just blows my mind. But here we are. What's the significance of this study, Steve?
Well, it goes back to kudos to the James Webb Telescope. And hopefully in future iterations of Cosmic Conversations, we can go and talk about the great accomplishments so far since December launch of 2021. But Frank, what this particular spacecraft did, the James Webb, it's imaging stars in an individual galaxy called Abo 470. It's just like a catalog galaxy. Not a very, unique galaxy in its sense. It's way the heck out there. How far? 4 billion light years. And now we have the capability with the James Webb to actually resolve individual stars, 40 plus, as they're saying, And they look at this amazing thing like this. They call it the Dragon Arc. They see this big arc of stars. Now, think about that. I mean, isn't that incredible? 4 billion light years away, resolution is getting down to nitty-gritty where you could never even see the galaxy itself with primitive previous type of devices. So that's amazing. Telling us again, as we talked about before, that we might have to just redo the entire textbook on how this whole universe was formed with the age timeline.
It's really, talk about a revisionist history in the best sense. That's what it is.
Right.
Let me try and squeeze in one more call here before we run out of time. Gene is in the Boogie Down Bronx. Hi, Gene.
Good evening, Frank Morano. I'm glad to meet you again, hear you again on the air. I wanted to ask Dr. Starr a question. What I'd like to know is, where could you get greater clarity if you're using a telescope, whether you're using a reflector or you're using a refractor?
Good question.
A reflector would be when you're using it's a mirror. It's a telescope with mirrors. A refractor is just with lenses.
Correct.
You know, I'm just curious.
Well, Gene, it's a very good question. The simple answer, real quick, is the larger the mirror, the better resolution you're going to get. But that's the reflector, as you accurately report. But here's the difficulty. For those that look at refractors, the ability to get a larger refractor, the cost goes up exponentially. The largest refractor ever built on the Earth was a 40-inch telescope. This is a piece of glass. They're 2 pieces of glass. They have to be bubble-free. So the answer is, the bigger the mirror, the more light you'll get. But the refractors cost so much, Gene, that they're almost out of the reach of most people because it uses 2 pieces of glass and the tubes are exceptionally long.
Wow. Steve, it is always a treat. Thank you again. I will see you in 2 weeks. For everybody else, keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars.